John Gill's Exposition of the entire Bible, verse by verse, brought to you by Discovering the Scriptures with Dr. Peter John. We are currently in 1 John chapter 4, reading the introduction to 1 John chapter 4. In this sentence, the apostle cautions against seducing spirits, advises to try them, and gives rules by which they may be known and by which they are distinguished from others, and then returns to his favorite subject, brotherly love. He exhorts the saints not to believe every man that came with doctrine to them, but to try them, since there are many false teachers in the world, and gives a rule by which they may be tried and judged, as that whatever teacher owns Christ to be come in the flesh is of God, but he that is not of God, but is the spirit of Antichrist that should come and was in the world. 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. But for the comfort of those to whom he writes, he observes that they were of God and had overcome these false teachers through the mighty power of the divine Spirit in them, who is greater than Satan and all his missionaries. 1 John 4, verse 4. He distinguishes between seducing spirits and faithful ministers of the word. The former are of the world, speak of worldly things, and worldly men hear them. But the latter are of God, and they that have any spiritual knowledge of God hears them, but such as are not of God do not hear them, by which may be known the spirit of truth from the spirit of error. 1 John chapter 4, verse 5. And then the apostle returns to his former exhortation to brotherly love, which he enforces by the following reasons: because it is of God, a fruit of his Spirit and grace, and because it is evidence of being born of God and having a true knowledge of him, whereas he that is destitute of it does not know him, seeing God is love. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7. And having affirmed that God is love, he proves it by the mission of his Son to be the propitiation for the sins of such that did not love him, and that they might live through him. Wherefore he argues that if God had such a love to men, to undeservingly of it, then the saints ought to love one another. 1 John 4:9. Other arguments follow, engaging to it as that God is invisible, and if he is to be loved, then certainly his people who are visible, and that such who love one another, God dwells in them, and his love is perfected in them, and that he dwells in them is known by the gift of the Spirit to them. 1 John 4:12. And that God the Father so loved the world as to send his Son to be the Savior of it, before asserted, is confirmed by the apostles, who were eyewitnesses of it, were also declared that whoever confesses the sonship of Christ, God dwells in him, and he in God, and who had an assurancy of the love of God to them, who is love itself, so that he that dwells in God, and God in him, dwells in love. 1 John, verse 14. And great are the advantages arising from hence, for hereby the saints' love to God is made perfect. They have boldness in the day of judgment, since as he is, so are they in this world, and fear is cast out by it. 1 John chapter 4, verse 17. But at least too much should be thought to be ascribed to love, that is said to be owing to the love of God to them, which is prior to theirs to him, and the reason of it, 1 John 4, verse 19. And the chapter is closed with observing the contradiction there is between the profession of love to God and hatred of the brother. Seeing God, who is invisible, cannot be loved if brethren that are seen are hated, and also the commandment that he loves God should love his brother also. 1 John 4:20.